The Lantern of Wishes. The night was impossibly still, as if the world had fallen into some sort of heavy, enchanted slumber. Mia gazed out of her bedroom window, watching the sky stretch infinitely above her, a canvas painted with countless stars that flickered and danced in the cool, quiet night air. They seemed to shine brighter tonight than ever before, their cold light piercing through the darkness, each star a tiny flame in an endless sky. The moon, a pale crescent, hung low over the horizon like a silent sentinel. It cast a soft, ethereal glow over the town below, bathing the streets in silver light, making everything look surreal, almost magical. Mia sat cross-legged on her bed, her back pressed against the headboard. The sheets were tangled around her legs, forgotten as she stared into the distance, her thoughts drifting far away. The room around her felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. Familiar in the sense that it held her belongings, her books, her drawings, her childhood memories, but foreign because it was all so new. This house, this town, these walls, none of them had the warmth of her old life. She still hadn't settled in. Still hadn't found her place here. Her fingers traced delicate patterns on the frosted window, fogging up the glass with each soft movement. The chill of the glass seeped through her fingertips, but she didn't mind. It was the only cold thing she could feel right now that made sense. The world outside, although beautiful, felt far away, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who was free to laugh, to be happy, to belong. Mia's heart felt heavy, weighted by the emotional distance she couldn't cross. It had been weeks since the move, and yet, it felt like she was still stuck in that same moment when the moving truck first pulled up in front of their new house, the same moment when her world flipped upside down. Everything that had been familiar was gone. The old street with its big oak tree in front of her best friend's house, the park where she had spent endless summer days playing hide-and-seek with her friends, the tiny corner store where she'd always run to buy candy. Everything was different now. The street she walked down every day felt like it was never meant for her. She had no one to wave to as she passed the houses. No friendly faces to smile at. The sidewalks felt lonely. Mia's chest tightened as she remembered the first day of school. She had walked into that old, creaky building filled with so many new faces, hoping for a chance to make a friend, to find someone who might at least smile at her. But all she found were strangers. Kids who glanced at her for a moment, maybe nodded, then quickly turned away. She had tried sitting at the lunch table by herself, and for a while, that was the safest place to be. She watched as groups of kids sat together, laughing, chatting, sharing stories and jokes that made her feel even more invisible. She knew she wasn't being ignored on purpose, but it didn't change the fact that no one seemed to see her. She was just there, a part of the background, like the shadows on the walls, unnoticed, unimportant. Even the teachers seemed to be caught up in their own worlds. Mia would raise her hand, try to speak up, and sometimes she could see the teacher's eyes skim right past her, moving on to the next student. It was like they had forgotten she was there too. At home, things weren't much better. Her dad was working long hours at his new job, and the few times he was home, he was so tired, so drained, that he barely had the energy to smile at her. Mia missed his laugh. She missed the way he would come into her room at night, tuck her in, and tell her stories about his own childhood, stories that always made her laugh until her stomach hurt. But now, there were no stories. No jokes. Only the sound of his keys rattling as he came through the door, the tired slump of his shoulders, and the quiet of the house as he slumped into bed to get ready for another day of work. Her mom tried to fill the silence, tried to create a semblance of normalcy. She unpacked boxes, hung up pictures, made dinner, but there was an unspoken weight between them. Mia could feel it every time she sat down to eat with her mom, every time she watched her mother glance at her phone with a sad, almost longing expression, as if waiting for someone to call, someone to check in. Mia wondered if her mom missed their old life too. If she missed the house, the neighborhood, the friends. Sometimes, Mia would catch her mom staring out the window, her gaze distant, and Mia knew that her mom was thinking the same thing Mia was. When will this feeling of being misplaced go away? But it never did. The feeling of being lost in a place that was supposed to be a fresh start was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Mia sighed and wiped a tear from her cheek. She hadn't even realized it had fallen. Her emotions were like a tide, rising and falling, pulling her deeper into the sea of her own thoughts. She wished more than anything that she could rewind time and go back to the life she knew. She wished she could walk back to her old school, sit in her familiar seat in the classroom, hear her best friend's voice echo across the playground. She wished she could talk to someone who understood, someone who would listen. But the stars above, as beautiful as they were, weren't offering her any answers tonight. They twinkled like little promises, distant and unreachable. Mia's chest tightened again, but this time, something shifted in the air around her. It was as if the world, in its eternal stillness, was waiting for her to find her own answers, to rise above the loneliness and fear that clung to her. She looked at the stars again, this time focusing on one particular star that seemed brighter than the rest. It was small, but it pulsed with a steady glow. There was something comforting about its consistency. Mia leaned her forehead against the cold glass, letting her breath fog up the window again, and in that moment, she made a wish. Not out loud, not one that could be heard, but a silent wish, the kind that only the heart can make. She wished for a friend, someone who would see her for who she truly was, someone who would talk to her, share secrets, and make her feel like she belonged again. The night stretched on, deep and endless, but Mia didn't feel quite so alone anymore. Somewhere, out there among the stars, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a spark of hope waiting for her to find it. A promise, in the stillness of the world, that things could change. That she could find her way. But tonight, something was different. It was subtle at first, just a glimmer, a flicker of light that seemed out of place. Mia, still sitting by the window, noticed it almost by accident. At first, she thought it was a trick of her eyes, perhaps the moonlight casting a strange reflection, or maybe a passing car's headlights. But no. The light wasn't moving in the way headlights would, nor did it have the cold, sterile glow of streetlights. It had a warmth to it, an almost magical quality, as though it was alive, pulsing gently in the dark. And it was coming from the woods. Her heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening with a mix of intrigue and unease. The woods behind her house were vast, shadowed, and to her, always a bit intimidating. She had often looked out the window at the thick canopy of trees, their dark silhouettes stretching up to the sky like silent sentinels. It was the kind of place that seemed to hold secrets, the kind of place she had always avoided when walking home from school or when playing outside. The thought of venturing into those woods alone had always made her skin crawl a little. But tonight, something was different. The light flickered again, this time brighter, more distinct. It seemed to pulse, almost rhythmically, like a heartbeat of the forest itself. Mia's breath caught in her throat, her body suddenly alert, every nerve awakened. What was it? It didn't look like anything she had seen before. Fireflies had a soft, ethereal glow, but this was steady, like a lantern held by someone, or something, hidden in the woods. And it wasn't the kind of light that belonged in this sleepy town. It didn't belong in the quiet, empty night. She shifted her position, moving closer to the window, her eyes squinting, trying to focus on the glow. It wasn't very far from her house, just a small distance into the edge of the woods, where the shadows of the trees became thick and impenetrable. It seemed to beckon to her, calling out in a way that was both strange and comforting. The more she stared, the more it seemed like it was waiting for her to make a move. The rational part of her mind, the one that always worried about danger, told her to stay put. It could be nothing. It could be an animal, a reflection, or even someone else just out there. But then again, Mia was no stranger to late-night curiosity. She had always been the kind of person who couldn't resist following a mystery. Whether it was the whispers of a hidden trail behind her old school or the strange noises that echoed from the woods at dusk, she had always found herself wondering what lay just beyond the edges of what was known. Tonight, however, the pull was stronger than ever. The glow seemed to draw her in, igniting a spark of adventure she hadn't felt in weeks. Her heart beat faster, but it wasn't fear she felt, it was something else. Excitement. An overwhelming desire to uncover what was hidden in the dark, to see for herself what lay beyond the trees. She hesitated for just a moment, her gaze still fixed on the glow. It was so unlike anything she had ever seen, and the woods, with their eerie stillness, had always felt like a place full of untold stories. Maybe, just maybe, there was something in those woods waiting to change her life. Something she couldn't yet understand, but that her heart somehow sensed was important. With a deep breath, Mia pushed herself off the bed, her feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. The room around her seemed even quieter now, the stillness pressing in like a heavy weight. Her room, with its familiar walls and comfort, felt miles away. She could feel the weight of the decision in her chest, the decision to step out of her comfort zone, to leave the safety of her room and step into the unknown. But tonight felt different. The air outside was thick with anticipation, almost electric. She opened her bedroom door carefully, making sure the hallway was empty. The house was eerily quiet, and she didn't want to risk anyone hearing her. Her parents were probably asleep by now, and it was late, later than usual for her to be awake. But the light in the woods, it didn't seem like something that would wait. Mia crept quietly down the stairs, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden steps. The house was dark, save for the faint light from the kitchen that streamed through the door. She passed it quickly, her heart racing as the thrill of doing something forbidden took hold of her. The door leading outside was just ahead. She reached for the handle, her fingers trembling just slightly. The cold air hit her instantly as she stepped outside, the night wrapping around her like a cloak. The air smelled fresh, a mix of damp earth and the faint scent of pine from the woods behind her house. It was cooler than she had expected, and she pulled her hoodie tighter around her. The glow in the distance was still there, though it seemed even more elusive now, like it was teasing her to follow it, leading her deeper into the unknown. Mia's feet moved instinctively, carrying her down the narrow path that wound around the edge of the yard and toward the dark expanse of trees. With each step she took, the woods seemed to grow quieter, the usual rustling of leaves replaced by the soft crunch of fallen twigs under her feet. The trees loomed tall and silent around her, casting long shadows across the ground. Mia's breath quickened slightly as she moved deeper into the forest, the golden glow still beckoning her forward. The path was narrow and tangled with branches, but she pushed through, her eyes fixed on the light ahead. As she moved closer, the glow began to brighten again, now unmistakably real, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. What was she getting herself into? What could be causing that light? Part of her wanted to turn back, to run back to the safety of her room, but another part, the part that had always been curious, that had always sought answers, pushed her on. The woods around her grew darker the farther she walked, the trees pressing in closer, until the glow ahead seemed like her only guide. It wasn't just a light anymore, it was almost like it had taken on a life of its own, pulsing and shimmering in the distance. Mia's steps quickened, her eyes wide with anticipation. Whatever was out there, whatever was creating that light, it was waiting for her. "Mia, don't stay up too late," her mom called from the kitchen, her voice soft and warm, floating through the house with a sense of comfort. The words, though familiar, felt distant to Mia, like a gentle reminder that didn't quite belong in the moment. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed to press in around her, heavy and suffocating, almost like the walls were waiting, too, for something to happen. Mia barely registered her mom's words as her hands moved quickly, almost instinctively, toward the sneakers by the door. "Okay, Mom," Mia replied, her voice louder than she meant, but it didn't matter. Her mind was already elsewhere, already focused on the strange light that had appeared in the woods behind their house, pulling her in like a magnet. She couldn't shake the feeling, the deep, inexplicable pull that was gnawing at her, urging her to go outside, to find out what was causing that glow. She bent down and quickly tied her sneakers, her fingers trembling slightly, though she couldn't quite understand why. The flashlight she grabbed from the drawer felt heavy in her hand, its cold metal reassuring. It wasn't much, just an old flashlight with a faint scratch on the lens from years of use, but in this moment, it felt like the only tool she needed. As she clicked the switch, the beam flickered to life, weak but steady. The light sliced through the darkness of the room, casting shadows on the walls, but it felt like nothing compared to the glow in the woods. That glow was something else entirely, something alive. Her heart raced as she stuffed the flashlight into the pocket of her jacket. She felt a mixture of excitement and unease, but it was the excitement that won out. The fear was there, sure, whispering doubts in the back of her mind, reminding her of the danger that lurked in unknown places. But the pull of the light was stronger. There was something about it that made her want to know, to see for herself, to find out what was hidden out there in the forest. "Stay safe, Mia," her mom's voice called again from the kitchen, this time with an edge of concern that Mia barely noticed. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be fine," Mia replied, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. She didn't want to explain, didn't want to tell her mom that there was something else out there, something that had grabbed her attention so completely that it felt like a secret too big to share. Her mom would never understand the pull of the woods, not like Mia did. The woods had always felt like an enigma, a quiet place that watched over the house, full of mysteries and untold stories. Now, they felt like an invitation. Mia moved quietly through the house, the soft click of her sneakers on the hardwood floors barely audible in the stillness. The house was a different kind of quiet tonight, the kind that seemed pregnant with possibilities. She couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words, but she felt like something was about to change. Something was calling her, and she had to answer. She passed the kitchen, glancing at her mom for a brief moment, but her mom's back was to her, her focus on whatever she was doing. Mia hesitated, then opened the back door, careful not to make a sound. The night air rushed in, crisp and cool, ruffling her hair as she stepped outside. The moment she did, the weight of the quiet outside seemed to settle around her. It was so still, so perfect, like the world itself was holding its breath. And then, there it was again, the glow. It flickered faintly through the trees, a soft golden light that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. The woods were dark and vast, stretching out before her like an impenetrable sea of shadows, but that light was different. It wasn't like the dull, artificial glow of streetlights. It was warm, inviting, as though it were meant to be seen. It drew her in, piece by piece, like a thread pulling her towards something hidden in the dark. Mia stepped off the porch, her feet crunching softly against the gravel path leading to the edge of the woods. The trees loomed ahead, tall and dark, their branches swaying in the breeze like silent sentinels. She had never ventured this far before, not alone at least. The forest had always felt like a boundary, a line that separated the known from the unknown. It was a place she had only dared to explore in daylight, when the trees weren't so intimidating, when the shadows weren't so thick. But tonight, the shadows seemed to part for her, as though they knew she was coming, as though they expected her. The woods were alive in a way she hadn't expected. There was a faint hum in the air, a whispering sound that was more felt than heard. The wind rustled the leaves in a pattern that almost seemed intentional, rhythmic, like the forest itself was breathing, its own heartbeat echoing in the silence. The glow ahead of her flickered once more, brighter now, like it had noticed her too. It wasn't a harsh, blinding light, but rather a soft, golden pulse that seemed to shimmer and change, as if it were something alive, something waiting for her. Her pace quickened, driven by something deep inside her, a need to know, to understand. Every step she took felt like she was walking deeper into a dream, or perhaps a memory she hadn't known she had. The trees parted just enough to let her through, creating a narrow path that seemed to beckon her forward. Mia felt both exhilarated and uneasy, but the unease didn't last long. It melted away as she took another step, the warmth of the glow drawing her in further, until she could feel the heat of it on her skin, like a fire not far off, but one that didn't burn. The forest grew thicker around her, the darkness heavier, but the glow was steady, a lighthouse in the night guiding her way. She didn't know where the path was leading, or what lay at the end of it, but it didn't matter. It felt like she was being pulled, drawn by a force that was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. Her hands trembled as she clutched the flashlight, but it was no longer necessary. The glow was enough to light her way. The closer she got, the more she realized that this wasn't just about curiosity. It was something else, something deeper. Her chest tightened with anticipation, and her heart beat faster, as though it understood the significance of the moment. She had been called here, drawn into this strange adventure by something she couldn't explain. The glow was so close now. It was like standing on the edge of something incredible, something unknown. Mia stopped for a moment, her breath shallow as she scanned the area around her. There was no sound, no movement, save for the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. The air felt thick, alive with an energy that made her skin prickle. The light pulsed again, steady and warm, like it was waiting for her to take the final step. And then, as if the forest had heard her thoughts, the glow intensified. It brightened, becoming so vivid, so real, that it seemed to fill the space around her. Mia's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized that whatever she was about to find, it was waiting for her. The world seemed to fall away, and all that remained was the golden glow that surrounded her, beckoning, calling her closer. Whatever this was, whatever this moment was leading to, Mia knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back. As Mia drew closer, her heartbeat quickened, and the air around her seemed to grow heavier, more charged with something she couldn't name. The soft glow that had beckoned her from the edge of the woods had grown brighter now, illuminating the dark, shadowy branches above her. The trees seemed to stretch out like ancient arms, leaning in to witness what was about to unfold, as though the forest itself was holding its breath in anticipation. The lantern, hanging from a low, gnarled branch, shimmered with a golden hue that seemed almost too perfect, too out of place in the wild, untamed woods. Its light was soft but undeniable, pulsing gently in the stillness of the night, as if it were alive. The lantern didn't just cast light. It seemed to breathe, to have a rhythm of its own. The glow was warm and inviting, and yet, there was something otherworldly about it, as if it belonged to another time, another realm. The intricate designs carved into the metal casing caught the light, sending tiny sparks of gold dancing across the bark of the tree. Mia froze in place, her pulse quickening as she took in the sight before her. The lantern was beautiful, its glow mesmerizing. It hung by a single chain, swaying gently in the wind, almost as if it were waiting for her to notice it. Her fingers tingled with an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch it, to see if it was real, to understand why it was here, in the middle of the woods, at the exact moment she had come searching for answers. Every instinct in her screamed to be cautious, to walk away, but the curiosity inside her was stronger. It was like the lantern was calling to her, pulling her closer with an invisible thread. Her feet seemed to move on their own as she stepped forward, one foot following the other, her breath shallow as the distance between her and the lantern shortened. The golden light enveloped her, bathing her in its warmth, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a deep sense of peace, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Mia reached out slowly, her hand trembling slightly as she drew closer to the lantern. Her fingers hovered just an inch from its smooth surface. The warmth of it radiated outward, almost comforting, like the sun on a cold day, but there was an underlying tension in the air, a sense that something was waiting, watching her. With a deep breath, Mia let her fingers brush the cool, smooth metal. The moment her skin made contact with the lantern's surface, a shock of warmth shot through her arm, and her breath hitched in her throat. It was as if the lantern had sent a jolt of energy directly into her, like a spark of magic flickering to life inside her chest. For a heartbeat, she wondered if she had imagined it, if the light and warmth were just illusions of her mind, but the sensation was too real, too vivid to dismiss. But before she could pull her hand away, a deep, gravelly voice echoed through the woods, rich and heavy with authority, as though it came from the very earth itself. The sound was like the rumble of distant thunder, filled with ancient power, and it seemed to reverberate through Mia's bones. "Who dares touch my lantern?" The voice was low and commanding, and it seemed to seep into her, sending a chill down her spine despite the warmth of the lantern. The words hung in the air, swirling around her like an unseen force. Mia's heart stopped for a beat, and her fingers froze, still hovering above the lantern's surface. The forest, which had been so eerily silent just moments ago, now felt alive with an energy she couldn't explain. The leaves rustled above her as if the trees themselves were listening, waiting for her response. Mia's breath caught in her throat as she pulled her hand back quickly, her heart hammering in her chest. The voice had come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It felt as though it had surrounded her, like the very trees were speaking. For a moment, she stood frozen, eyes wide, trying to process what had just happened. She glanced around, her breath shallow, searching for the source of the voice. But there was no one. No figure, no presence. Just the lantern, still glowing softly in the dimness of the woods. Her mind raced, her thoughts a jumble. Was she imagining things? Was it just the isolation, the strange light, the wildness of the night playing tricks on her senses? But no, this felt different. This was real. The voice had been too powerful, too commanding to be a figment of her imagination. Before she could speak, the voice came again, its tone colder this time, a ripple of something ancient and unyielding threading through the words. "You've come to the heart of the woods," the old man said, his voice deep and gravelly, yet surprisingly gentle. It was a voice that seemed to echo with the weight of ages, like the wind rustling through the trees or the distant rumble of thunder. "The lantern. You were drawn to it, weren't you?" Mia nodded, her breath still shallow, but she didn't speak. The words caught in her throat again, lodged there as if her voice was being swallowed by the mystery of the moment. How did he know? How could he possibly know what had drawn her here, what had been pulling her toward this strange place in the woods? It was as though he had been waiting for her, anticipating her arrival, and somehow, that realization made her feel even more uneasy. The old man's eyes softened, and he gave a small, knowing smile, as if he understood her confusion, and maybe even her fear. "Curiosity is a powerful thing, child," he said, his words almost a whisper, as though he were speaking directly to her soul. "It leads us down paths we never intended to walk. Sometimes, those paths reveal secrets we are not ready to know." Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, like he was peeling back the layers of her very being, reading her mind as easily as if it were an open book. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain herself, but she knew one thing for certain: the old man was no ordinary figure. He was part of something much larger, something that stretched beyond the boundaries of her understanding. The lantern, still glowing softly above them, seemed to pulse in response to his words, casting flickers of golden light that danced across the ground at their feet. Mia glanced up at it, then back at the man. She couldn't help herself. Her curiosity was still there, still burning brightly within her, despite the strange unease that had settled over her like a heavy fog. "Who are you?" Mia finally asked, her voice trembling slightly but louder now, as if the question had been building inside her, aching to escape. "What is this place?" The old man chuckled softly, a deep, rich sound that resonated through the forest like a distant echo. "Ah," he said, "questions. Always the questions. But you are not ready for answers yet. Not all at once, anyway." His eyes glinted with something. Amusement, perhaps, or something deeper, something wiser. The woods do not reveal their secrets to just anyone. It takes more than curiosity to understand their true nature. Mia felt a sense of frustration building within her, mingled with the quiet thrill of being so close to something so enigmatic, so beyond her comprehension. She had come here to find answers, to unravel the mystery of the lantern, to understand what it meant, why it was here, and why it had drawn her in. But now, standing before the old man, she realized that the answers she sought might be far more elusive than she had ever imagined. "Then, what should I do?" Mia asked, her voice quieter now, as the weight of the unknown pressed down on her. She felt small in the presence of the old man, like a child standing in the shadow of something far greater than herself. The lantern continued to glow above them, its light flickering and pulsing, like a heartbeat, as though it was waiting for something, for her. The old man's smile deepened, and for a moment, Mia could have sworn she saw something else in his eyes, something ancient, something knowing. He reached up slowly, his gnarled fingers brushing against the air as if gathering the words from the very fabric of the night. "You must listen," he said, his voice low and resonant. "The lantern is not just a thing of light. It is a guide, a test. And those who seek its truth must first prove themselves worthy." Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of his words settled over her like a cloak, heavy and dense, and the air around her seemed to hum with unspoken meaning. She had stepped into something far bigger than herself, something that had been waiting, watching, and now it seemed she was a part of it. "Prove myself," Mia repeated, her voice barely above a whisper, unsure if she was hearing him right. "How?" The old man looked at her with a glint of something unreadable in his gaze. "That," he said, "is for you to discover." The old man's chuckle faded into the stillness of the forest, leaving an odd silence in its wake. For a moment, the only sound Mia could hear was the beating of her own heart, thundering in her chest as her mind struggled to process the words he had just spoken. Lantern of Wishes. The phrase echoed in her mind, repeating over and over like a mantra she couldn't quite grasp. His eyes sparkled as he observed her reaction, amused yet patient, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment for a long time. The lantern, now glowing with an even brighter golden light, seemed to pulse in rhythm with the rising tension around them. It was as if the air had thickened, each particle heavy with the promise of something extraordinary, something beyond Mia's wildest dreams. The old man took a step closer, his voice lowering to a more intimate tone, as if revealing a long-kept secret. Child. This lantern is special. It has the power to grant wishes, powerful ones, ones that come from the heart. But not just any wish. It's not some trinket that grants petty desires. The Lantern of Wishes works with the deepest desires, the ones hidden deep within your soul. The ones you may not even fully understand yet. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Wishes. Real wishes. She had heard stories of magic, of wishes being granted, but it always seemed like a fairy tale, something meant for books and legends, not her, not someone like her. And yet, standing here, staring at the ancient lantern, with the odd old man before her, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was real, that somehow, this impossible thing had just become possible. I don't understand, Mia said, her voice barely a whisper, though her mind was spinning. She glanced from the lantern to the old man and back again. Why me? Why now? How do I use it? The old man smiled, his gaze thoughtful, almost nostalgic, as if he had seen this same moment unfold countless times before. Child, he said, his voice tinged with both wisdom and sorrow, the Lantern of Wishes doesn't just pick anyone. It chooses those who are lost, those who need it the most. And it doesn't grant wishes easily. The lantern can only offer what you truly need, not necessarily what you think you want. That's where the test lies. Mia swallowed, her throat tight. The words hung in the air, settling like a thick fog in her mind. She had so many wishes, so many things she wanted, especially now, after everything that had happened, after the move to this strange town, after the loneliness she felt at school, after her father's long hours at work. But none of those things felt as important as the strange, pulsing lantern in front of her, its golden light growing even warmer in the cool night air. The man stepped even closer, his long, leaf-strewn coat brushing against the ground with a soft, rustling sound. The Lantern of Wishes is not a toy, he continued, his voice gentle but firm. It's a tool, a force. When you make a wish, you don't just receive something in return, you give something in exchange. A price must be paid. Sometimes it's something small, sometimes it's something much, much greater. But remember this, the lantern doesn't lie. It doesn't deceive. It only grants what you truly need. Mia's head spun with the weight of his words. What do you mean, something must be given? She asked, her voice faltering. The thought of paying a price made her uneasy, a deep sense of caution rising within her. What could a wish possibly cost her? Was there a price she was willing to pay? Was she even ready to pay it? The old man smiled again, his eyes twinkling with an odd mixture of kindness and mischief. That's for you to discover, he said cryptically. The lantern will show you in time the true nature of your wish. But be careful, Mia. Wishes have a way of changing us. They are not always what they seem. Mia was silent for a long moment, processing what he had said. Her mind raced through all the things she had ever wished for, to make friends, to feel like she belonged, to be closer to her father, to be part of something meaningful. She could feel the weight of each of those desires pressing down on her, and yet, she wasn't sure which wish was the one she needed. How could she? She had always wished for things to be different, for life to be easier, but was that really what she needed? Was she seeking something deeper, something beyond what she could see with her eyes? The lantern pulsed again, as if it were waiting for her to make a choice. Its glow was so bright now, it almost felt like the center of the universe, calling out to her, pulling her in with its golden light. Mia felt the urge to reach out and touch it again, to feel its warmth, to make her wish and take whatever came in return. But fear held her back. The weight of the old man's words hovered in the air, lingering like a shadow. Finally, Mia asked, her voice trembling but resolute, "What do you mean by changing? What happens after I make a wish?" The old man's smile faded slightly, and his eyes darkened with a flicker of something ancient, something long forgotten. Child, wishes are like seeds. You plant them, and they grow, but you cannot control how they will blossom. The lantern will give you what you need, but it will not always be what you expect. And sometimes what you wish for may change you in ways you can never undo. Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. She couldn't help it. She glanced up at the lantern again, its golden glow now so intense it almost hurt to look at. She had come here looking for answers, searching for something to make sense of the chaos in her life. But now that she stood here, in the heart of the forest, with the lantern of wishes glowing in front of her, she realized the power of what lay before her. This was no ordinary wish. This was a chance to change her life, to change something deep inside of her, and the possibility both thrilled and terrified her. I don't know what I want, Mia whispered, almost to herself. How do I even know if this is right? The old man nodded slowly, as though he had expected this response. That's the first lesson, child, he said softly. The lantern doesn't offer its gifts to those who seek only the surface. It demands honesty with yourself and with the world. Your wish must come from the deepest part of your heart, the part you may not even fully understand. And that takes courage. Mia stared at the lantern, feeling the weight of his words settle deep into her chest. This was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The lantern could give her a wish, her wish, but at what cost? What price would she have to pay to get what she truly needed? The golden light shimmered again, flickering like a heartbeat, as if the lantern itself were urging her forward. It's your choice now, the old man said softly. But remember, once you make your wish, there is no turning back. The lantern will give, but it will also take. Mia closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to center herself amidst the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. The night was still, the forest waiting with bated breath, and the lantern pulsed gently in the darkness, its golden glow beckoning her forward. What would she wish for? What was it that she truly needed? And more importantly, was she ready to face the consequences of the wish she would soon make? The old man's words echoed through the quiet forest, hanging in the air like a warning carried on the wind. His gaze intensified, and for the first time, Mia felt a shiver of something deeper than fear, a sense of foreboding that tightened her chest. She could almost hear the weight of his words, pressing down on her, urging her to think carefully. It was as though the forest itself had quieted in anticipation, as if every leaf, every rustle of the trees, was waiting to see what she would do next. The man studied her with those ancient eyes that seemed to hold the entire forest in their depths. 3 wishes, he repeated, as if the number itself held more power than she could understand. Not one more. Not one less. And once those wishes are made, they cannot be undone. No magic, no force, not even the lantern itself, can change what has already been set into motion. Mia swallowed hard, her throat dry, her mind racing. 3 wishes. The weight of that promise settled over her like a heavy cloak. 3 wishes to change her life, to alter the very fabric of her reality. The possibilities were endless. But so were the consequences. What if she made the wrong wish? What if the wish she thought would solve everything turned out to be something far worse than she could imagine? She glanced up at the lantern, still glowing softly in the night, its golden light now feeling more like a warning than an invitation. She could feel its pull, like a magnetic force drawing her in, urging her to make her choice. But she was overwhelmed. She had never been good at making decisions, let alone decisions that could shape her entire future. The old man saw the hesitation in her eyes and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if he understood the turmoil swirling inside her. "Do not rush, child," he said, his voice now softer, more contemplative. "The lantern does not care for those who make hasty decisions. It requires thought, reflection, and above all, clarity. Your wishes must come from a place of true understanding, for they will follow you, shaping the very course of your life. And once they are made, there is no going back." Mia felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of her neck. She had so many things she wanted, things she believed would make her life better. She could wish for friends who truly understood her, or for her dad to have more time for her, or for her family to feel whole again in this new town. The options seemed endless. But the more she thought about it, the more uncertain she became. What if she made a wish that seemed good in the moment but led to something far worse later on? The old man's eyes softened, and he took a slow step forward, his presence both comforting and unsettling at the same time. "Understand this, Mia," he said, his voice low and steady. "Each wish will take something from you. Nothing is ever truly free. The world shifts when you ask for something. And when you shape the world with your desires, you also shape yourself, for better or worse." Mia stared at him, the meaning of his words sinking in slowly, like the realization of an inevitable truth. She had seen what desire could do, how it could twist people, how it could lead them down paths they never intended to walk. But this was different. This wasn't about making small choices or simple wishes. This was about altering the course of her life, and maybe even the lives of those around her. The man continued, his voice carrying a tone of solemnity, as though he had witnessed the consequences of countless wishes throughout his long life. "It's easy to wish for something when you believe it will make you happy," he said, "but happiness is a delicate thing. It does not always come from what we think we want. Sometimes, it comes from what we need, even if we cannot see it in the moment. And sometimes, our desires cloud our judgment, leading us to make choices we later regret." Mia's thoughts swirled like a storm, each wish she had ever made flashing before her eyes. She remembered how she had wished for her old life back when they first moved to this town, how she had wished for everything to be easier, how she had wished for things to feel normal again. But those wishes hadn't come true in the way she had hoped. Things had changed, yes, but not in the way she had imagined. There had been no magic, no quick fixes. Just life, unfolding with all its imperfections. "3 wishes," she whispered again, her voice trembling as she felt the enormity of the choice before her. "And every choice shapes the world." The old man nodded again, his expression unreadable. "Indeed, every wish has its ripples. You may think you're changing your own life, but the world around you shifts in ways you cannot predict. A small wish, made in haste, can create waves that reach far beyond what you intended. And once those waves are set into motion, they will ripple out, touching the lives of others for better or worse." Mia's mind raced. She thought of her father, working late every night, growing distant. She thought of her lonely days at school, the empty seat beside her in every class, the faces of her classmates who seemed to ignore her. What if she could wish for all that to change? What if she could wish for everything to be different, better? Would that make her happy? But what if it didn't? What if her wish, whatever it was, ended up making things worse? The old man seemed to sense her inner conflict. "Wishes are not to be taken lightly," he said, his tone shifting, more serious now. "They are powerful, yes, but they are also unpredictable. And sometimes, the cost of a wish is not immediately clear. You may receive what you want, but it may come with consequences you didn't foresee." Mia nodded, trying to absorb all that he was saying. She thought of the lantern, the golden light that had first drawn her here. It was so tempting, so full of promise. It was as if it held all the answers, all the magic she had ever dreamed of. But now, standing here with the old man, she realized that there was so much more to it than she had initially thought. Wishes weren't just about making things better. They were about change, and change always came with a cost. The old man sighed, his eyes softening. "I will not tell you what to wish for, Mia," he said gently. "That is your decision, and yours alone. But I will tell you this, think carefully. Wishes have a way of becoming much more than we expect. They may start as something small, something simple, but they can grow, twist, into something we can no longer control. And once that happens, you may find that you've changed too. And you may not even recognize the person you become." Mia stood there, in the silence of the night, staring at the lantern, her heart racing. She felt the weight of his words settling on her shoulders like a cloak, heavy with the realization of what she was about to face. 3 wishes. 3 choices that could alter everything she knew. And no matter what she chose, there would be no turning back. The old man turned his gaze toward the lantern, his expression distant now, as if lost in thought. "You have been given the chance to shape your destiny, Mia," he said quietly. "But it is not a gift to be taken lightly. Use your wishes wisely, for they will not only change the world, but they will change you too." Mia carried the lantern back to her house, her footsteps slow and heavy with the weight of the decision she had just made. The glow from the lantern seemed to pulse softly in her hand, a constant reminder of the power she now held, and the responsibility that came with it. The night air was crisp, but she barely noticed the chill as she walked, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of possibilities. The world felt strangely still, as if even the trees were holding their breath, waiting for her to make her choice. When she finally reached her room, she placed the lantern gently on her desk, its golden light casting long, soft shadows across the room. Her heart was still racing. She had made the wish. She had actually done it. But what now? Mia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the lantern. Could it really be that simple? Could a wish, just one small wish, truly change everything? Her heart longed for the loneliness to end. She had felt its cold grip for so long now, its weight pressing on her every day. Maybe, just maybe, this was the answer she had been waiting for. The promise of connection, of friendship, of belonging. With a deep breath, she whispered the words that had been swirling in her mind for so long, her voice barely above a whisper, but firm with the weight of her desire. I wish I wasn't so lonely. The moment the words left her lips, the lantern glowed brighter, its golden light flooding the room in a soft, comforting warmth. It felt alive in a way that Mia had never experienced before. The warmth spread through her, as though it were wrapping her in a blanket of reassurance, of promise. For a moment, she thought she might actually feel something change within her, something tangible, something that reached deep down into her soul. She lay back on her bed, her mind still reeling, as the golden light from the lantern continued to shine. Despite the warmth, she couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety twist in her stomach. Had she made the right choice? Was this really what she needed, or had she just asked for a quick fix, a fleeting solution to her deeper problem? She closed her eyes, trying to quiet her racing thoughts, and drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, Mia woke to an unfamiliar sensation, a feeling of lightness, as though something had shifted in the very air around her. At first, she thought it was just the lingering effects of her dream, the golden glow still in her mind, but as she sat up and stretched, she realized that her room felt different. It wasn't just the light or the warmth from the lantern that now sat on her desk, casting a soft glow even in the morning light. It was the feeling of something new, something different. She shook her head, trying to shake off the fog of sleep. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe she was overthinking things. But something inside her was certain that something had changed. As she got dressed and got ready for school, she couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation that hung in the air. It wasn't just a normal morning. Something felt alive, something was waiting to happen. The thought made her both excited and nervous at the same time. What would today be like? Had her wish really changed her life in some way? When Mia walked into school, she was immediately aware of the difference. It wasn't just that the morning seemed brighter, or that the hallway seemed warmer, it was the way people were looking at her. She passed a few kids she didn't recognize, and they actually smiled at her. Not the distant, polite smiles she had grown used to, but real smiles. Smiles that seemed to say, "Hey, I see you." Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she wondered if she was imagining it. But it wasn't just one or two kids. Everywhere she looked, there were eyes meeting hers. Eyes that didn't look past her or avoid her. There was a new energy in the air, a subtle shift that she couldn't quite put into words. As she walked to her locker, a girl she had barely spoken to before called out to her. "Hey Mia. How's it going?" Mia stopped, surprised, her heart racing in her chest. Good," she said, her voice shaky. "How about you?" "I'm good," the girl said, grinning. "Did you finish that math assignment? I'm kind of stuck on one of the problems." For a moment, Mia just stared at her, blinking in disbelief. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't even known this girl's name before. And yet here she was, talking to her like they were old friends. It felt surreal, as if she had stepped into an entirely different world, a world where she wasn't invisible anymore, where she mattered. By the time lunch rolled around, Mia's head was spinning. She had been approached by more people than she could count. People she had never really spoken to before, or people who had always seemed distant, uninterested. And now, they were talking to her like she was one of them. Like she had always belonged. As Mia walked into the cafeteria, her eyes scanned the room, looking for a place to sit. She had expected to find her usual solitary spot, the one where she would quietly eat her lunch, lost in her thoughts. But as she scanned the tables, her gaze landed on a group of girls waving at her from a table in the center of the room. "Mia, over here," one of them called out. We saved you a seat." Mia blinked, a rush of warmth flooding her chest. Her legs moved before she could think about it, her feet carrying her toward the table with an unfamiliar sense of ease. When she reached them, the girls smiled, pulling out a chair for her. "Sit with us," another girl said, grinning. "We're talking about the new movie that's coming out. Have you seen the trailer yet?" Mia smiled, her heart beating faster as she slid into the chair. The conversation was light, full of laughter and stories, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something. These weren't just people she knew, these were people who wanted to be around her. She was no longer the quiet girl on the outside looking in. She was in it with them. The day continued in much the same way. Every interaction, every conversation, felt easier, more natural. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Mia felt like a completely different person. She had gone from feeling invisible to being surrounded by people who wanted to know her. Her heart swelled with a sense of belonging, with the kind of connection she had always longed for. As she walked home, her mind replayed the events of the day, the surreal way everything had fallen into place. It was like the loneliness that had once defined her had simply vanished. But as she neared her house, a small, lingering question tugged at her mind. Had it really been the wish that had caused this? Or was it something else? Something more than just a wish, something deeper? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. Today had been a turning point. Things had changed, and for the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the days stretched on, Mia's newfound world of friendship began to feel less like a dream and more like a heavy burden. At first, everything had seemed perfect. The laughter at lunch, the endless text messages, the way her classmates were always eager to chat or hang out with her. It had all been so overwhelming in the best way possible. For the first time in ages, Mia felt seen, valued, included. She had wished to feel connected, and now, it was like she was drowning in the attention. It started with small things. One of her friends, Sophie, would text her multiple times a day, asking about her plans, wanting to know every detail of what Mia was doing. At first, Mia thought it was just normal enthusiasm, the kind that comes with new friendships. But soon, it wasn't just Sophie. It was Emma and Luke, and even the quiet girls she had never really spoken to before, all trying to fill up every moment of Mia's time. They started waiting for her at the school gates, their eyes eagerly scanning for her as soon as the bell rang, always just a little too close. Every time Mia tried to walk home alone, one of them would show up at her door, asking if they could come along, or if she wanted to hang out at their house. They didn't even seem to take a breath before bombarding her with questions, stories, and requests for plans. They made it clear that Mia was theirs, their friend, their constant companion. At first, Mia didn't know how to react. She felt guilty if she pulled away, like she was somehow letting them down. They seemed so eager, so invested, as if they were afraid of losing her. But the more they followed her, the more she found herself retreating. She could no longer go for a quiet walk in the park, or sit by herself at her desk to read, without someone popping up beside her, chatting about their day, about school, about whatever was on their mind. The once welcome company had started to feel suffocating, like a constant shadow that followed her everywhere. Even at home, it wasn't any better. Mia couldn't walk through the door without hearing a phone buzz, a text alert lighting up her screen with yet another message. Sophie would call her during dinner, even though Mia had already told her she couldn't talk. Luke would send voice messages, leaving long rants about how he couldn't wait to see her the next day. Emma would show up at her window, knocking on it to ask if she could come in and hang out, even though it was already late. At first, Mia tried to be accommodating. She didn't want to seem rude or ungrateful. She understood that they were just excited to have her as a friend. But as the days wore on, the pressure started to build. They were everywhere. They were always around, always wanting something from her, always demanding her attention, as if she were their world and they were hers. It was as if her life, once her own, had been taken over by their needs, their desires. And it wasn't just the frequency of the visits or the messages, it was the way they acted when she wasn't there. Mia started to notice subtle things that made her uncomfortable. Sophie's mood would shift when Mia said she needed some time alone. The next time they spoke, Sophie would make her feel guilty for not prioritizing their friendship. Luke would give her disappointed looks when she didn't agree to spend hours at his house after school. It felt like every time Mia tried to take a step back, to breathe for a moment, they pushed even harder. They didn't just want her company, they demanded it. One evening, after an especially tiring day at school, Mia found herself sitting alone in her room, holding the lantern in her hands. She could feel the weight of it, both physical and metaphorical. The golden light still pulsed softly, but it no longer felt like a comforting glow. It felt like a reminder of the wish she had made. She had wished to escape loneliness, to find connection. But now, what she had was something different. Something that wasn't exactly what she had wanted. She stared at the lantern for a long moment, turning it over in her hands. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake. What had seemed like an answer to her loneliness was now a prison. She had been given friends, yes, but they were not the kind of friends she had imagined. These weren't the kind of connections that lifted her up. They felt more like chains, binding her to a life that was constantly under surveillance, a life where she couldn't breathe without someone else needing her, pulling at her, demanding her attention. "Is this what I wanted?" she whispered aloud, her voice barely above a breath, as if speaking the words would make them true. She glanced out the window at the dark sky, the stars twinkling faintly, and wondered if she had made a mistake by wishing for something she didn't fully understand. She had thought that by making that wish, she would be happy, that things would be easier, that she would feel seen and heard in the way she had always longed for. But now, all she felt was suffocated. The more friends she had, the more she felt isolated, like she was losing herself in the expectations they had placed on her. Her thoughts swirled in a confusing mix of frustration and regret. She had wanted to feel connected, to feel wanted, to have a group of people who would be there for her, who would support her. But now she wasn't sure if the friendships she had gained were real, or if they were simply the byproduct of a wish gone wrong. Mia closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to her forehead, trying to clear her mind. What had she truly wanted? Was it just the illusion of connection that she had longed for, or was it something deeper? She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't quite belong. Now, with all these new friends, she didn't feel any more understood. She felt more alone, trapped in a web of her own making. For a moment, Mia considered making another wish, to undo the one she had made, to take back the friends who now felt more like strangers. But she hesitated. She had learned that wishes weren't something to be made lightly. The consequences were unpredictable, and she wasn't sure if the answer lay in making another wish, or in accepting that the world didn't always give her exactly what she wanted. Mia looked back at the lantern, the golden glow still flickering softly in the darkness. Her fingers tightened around its smooth surface. She couldn't help but wonder if somehow, the lantern could offer her a way out of this tangled mess of too much attention and not enough space. But even as she thought it, she knew that nothing was ever that simple. No wish, no matter how carefully crafted, could ever truly give her what she needed if she wasn't clear about what that was. "Is this really what I wanted?" she repeated, the question lingering in the air like a whispered secret. She didn't know the answer. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, Mia knew that the path ahead wouldn't be so easy to navigate. She had asked for connection, but now, she needed to figure out what kind of connection she truly wanted, and if she could find it without losing herself in the process. Mia sat on her bed, her thoughts swirling like a storm inside her mind. The more she reflected on the consequences of her first wish, the more she realized how far off track things had gone. Her loneliness had faded, yes, but at what cost? The friends she had gained were overwhelming, suffocating in their constant need for her attention, and Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost control of her own life. She needed to fix it. She needed to make another wish. "I'll be careful this time," she muttered to herself, as if saying the words aloud would make the wish more precise, more thoughtful. She clutched the lantern in her hands, feeling its weight once again, a weight that seemed heavier than before, as though it knew the weight of her decisions and their consequences. She thought about her dad, who had been working so much lately, about how their time together had become scarce, replaced by the long hours he spent at his job. Mia missed him. She missed their mornings together, their little traditions, their quiet moments. She missed feeling like a family. Her mind raced with possibilities, trying to shape the perfect wish. She needed it to be different this time, more controlled. She didn't want another wish that spiraled out of control. She needed something that would make her feel like her life was right again, the way it used to be before. "I'm glad you're here, Dad," Mia said one evening, as they sat together after dinner. Her voice was gentle, but there was an edge of uncertainty in it. But sometimes, I need a little space. I still need my own time, you know? Her dad looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to say that. But then, he softened. Of course, sweetie. I understand. I don't want to miss anything. I've missed so much already. Mia nodded, understanding the weight of his words. I know, Dad. And I'm happy you're here. I just need a little balance, that's all. Her dad smiled, the tension in his face easing. I get it. I'll work on giving you more space, Mia. I want to make it up to you. As the days passed, Mia began to realize that, while her dad's presence was a gift she had wished for, the perfect balance she had envisioned was trickier than she had expected. Time, like everything else, had to be navigated with care. She needed time with her dad, yes, but she also needed to find a way to carve out time for herself. She had wanted to mend the space between them, but the wish had brought with it its own complications. Mia looked down at the lantern in her room one evening, her fingers lightly tracing its surface. She had wished for her dad to be home more, to spend more time with her. And in some ways, it had worked, better than she could have imagined. But now, she needed to figure out how to make this new balance work, how to navigate this new reality where her wish had come true, but with consequences she hadn't quite expected. Mia lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness around her feeling like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. The warm glow of the lantern was the only light in the room, casting faint shadows on the walls. It had been a few weeks since her dad started his new job, and at first, everything had seemed perfect. He was home more often, they played games together, had dinner as a family, and even worked on school projects side by side. It was everything Mia had wished for. But now, as the days wore on, things were starting to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her dad's new job had come with better hours, yes, but it also came with a heavy price. The pay was much lower than his old job, and it didn't take long for the financial strain to begin showing. Mia could see the change in her parents. Her mom, once vibrant and full of energy, was now constantly tired, her eyes shadowed with worry. She'd begun working extra shifts at the local diner, but it was never enough. She'd come home late at night, exhausted, only to sit down and fret over bills that seemed to multiply every time she looked away. The tension in their house had grown, and the happiness Mia had felt just a few weeks ago was slowly slipping away. She heard the murmurs late at night, her mom and dad in the kitchen, talking in low, strained voices that she could barely make out. She tried to pretend she was asleep, but the words slipped through the cracks of the door, piercing the silence. We can't keep up with this, Mark, her mom's voice said, tight with frustration. The bills are piling up, and you know we're barely scraping by as it is. I know, her dad replied, his voice weary. But what was I supposed to do? I had to take the job, Mia needed me. We needed more than just you here, Mark. We needed you to make sure we didn't drown in bills. I'm working as much as I can, but it's not enough. Nothing is enough. Mia's heart sank as she heard the crack in her mom's voice. The words, though muffled, were enough to tell her everything she needed to know. Things were worse than they had been before. Her mom was stretched thin, trying to juggle everything. Her dad, despite his best intentions, wasn't able to make the financial burden any lighter. The weight of his absence was being replaced by the strain of trying to keep things together. And Mia, she felt completely helpless in all of it. She turned over in bed, pulling the covers tighter around her, trying to block out the noise of her parents' argument. But the more she tried to shut it out, the more it pressed in on her. It was as though the walls of her home had become smaller, suffocating, filled with tension she couldn't escape. And it was all because of her wish. She had wanted her dad to be home more. She had wanted more time with him. But now that wish had led to this. It was as though the universe had flipped everything upside down. Her family was falling apart, and Mia didn't know what to do to fix it. She sat up in bed, tears gathering in her eyes. The weight of the situation was too much to bear. She had wanted to fix everything to make things right, but with every wish, it felt like something was slipping further out of her control. First, her friends had overwhelmed her. Now, her dad's presence was making their financial problems worse, and her mom was bearing the brunt of it all. Mia had only wanted to make her life better, to bring people closer to her, but all of her wishes seemed to have unintended consequences. She reached for the lantern, her fingers trembling as she grasped its smooth, warm surface. The golden glow flickered in her hands, as though it too sensed her confusion and sorrow. She had been so careful with her second wish, so certain that she was doing the right thing. And yet, here she was, feeling more lost than ever before. With a soft sob, she whispered, her voice quivering with emotion, "Why does everything I wish for seem to go wrong?" The lantern flickered again, casting long shadows across the room, but there was no answer. Only silence. Mia closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. She felt the weight of her disappointment crashing over her, the crushing realization that maybe the wishes weren't the answer after all. It wasn't just that things hadn't turned out as she expected, it was that she didn't know how to make things right anymore. No matter how much she wished for something, it seemed like she couldn't control the fallout. She had hoped that the lantern would bring her the happiness she was longing for, but now all she had was a tangled mess of consequences that she couldn't untangle. She had asked for her dad's presence, and she got it, but it had come at the cost of financial stability. Her mom was stretched thin, working extra hours, and her dad was exhausted, torn between his family and his new job. They were stuck in a cycle of stress and worry, and Mia couldn't fix it with another wish. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how powerless she felt. The world seemed so much bigger than her, full of forces she couldn't control, no matter how hard she tried to wish for things to change. She wished for connection, and it had left her feeling overwhelmed. She wished for her dad to be home, and now her family was falling apart in new ways. Was there even a way to undo all of this? Could she even go back to where things had been before? As the tears continued to fall, Mia felt the weight of the lantern in her hands, its gentle glow illuminating the room. She thought about her first wish, her second wish, and all the things she had hoped for. It seemed like every time she tried to make things better, the world around her shifted in ways she didn't understand. She could feel the consequences of her choices creeping in, like shadows that followed her wherever she went. She didn't know what the answer was, but she knew one thing: she couldn't keep going like this, making wishes without truly understanding what they would bring. The weight of her desires, of her wishes, was too much for her to bear. And in that moment, Mia realized that the lantern might have given her the power to change things, but it hadn't given her the wisdom to know what to wish for. It was as though she was fumbling in the dark, hoping for light, but only finding shadows. Mia clutched the lantern tightly against her chest, her sobs quieting as she spoke softly into the night. "I just want things to be okay again," she whispered. "But I don't know how to fix it." And as the golden glow of the lantern flickered gently, it seemed to pulse with a quiet understanding. But still, it didn't offer answers. Not yet. Mia stood at the edge of the woods, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth swirling around her. She had walked this path before, but tonight it felt different, heavier. The weight of her choices pressed on her chest as she made her way deeper into the forest, the lantern swinging gently in her hand, casting an eerie glow on the ground beneath her feet. Every step she took seemed to echo her doubts and fears, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to find the old man or if she was simply looking for an escape from the mess she had created. The trees loomed above her like silent guardians, their shadows stretching long and dark, but there was a strange comfort in the silence. As she ventured deeper, the air grew cooler, and the distant sounds of the forest began to fade. It felt as though the world had quieted down just for her. The only noise that remained was the soft crunch of leaves beneath her sneakers and the gentle rustling of branches in the breeze. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she saw it, the faint glow of a campfire flickering through the trees. Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had found him. The old man. He sat cross-legged on the ground, his long gray beard shimmering in the firelight. The flames danced in his eyes, reflecting a warmth and depth that seemed to reach into Mia's very soul. The fire crackled softly, sending occasional sparks into the air. It was a peaceful, almost hypnotic sight, but Mia's heart felt anything but calm. The guilt and confusion weighed down on her, making every step toward him feel like a struggle. When the old man noticed her approaching, he didn't stand up or say anything at first. He simply smiled in that knowing way of his, as if he had been expecting her all along. Mia felt a wave of relief, mixed with a sense of embarrassment. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain the mess she had made of everything. Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke, her voice shaking. "I messed up," she admitted, her words coming out in a whisper. "My wishes. They made everything worse. I didn't think it through. I just wanted things to be better, but I didn't understand what I was asking for." The old man's smile didn't waver. Instead, his eyes softened with a quiet understanding, as if he had heard this kind of confession many times before. He gestured to the space beside him, inviting her to sit. Mia hesitated for a moment, then sank down beside him, the cool earth beneath her grounding her in the reality of her situation. She stared into the fire, watching the flames flicker and twist, her mind swirling with the weight of everything that had gone wrong. "You don't have to apologize, child," the old man said gently, his gravelly voice soothing, yet firm. "It's not the wishes that are wrong, but the way we choose to use them. Wishes are powerful, yes. But power, when wielded carelessly, can cause as much harm as good." Mia swallowed, nodding slowly as his words sank in. She hadn't thought about it like that before. She had been so focused on her own desires, on trying to fix everything, that she hadn't considered the consequences. She had been impulsive, rushing into decisions without fully understanding what they would mean. And now, her world was more complicated than it had ever been. "Then why did you give me the lantern?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration and confusion. "Why let me make these wishes if they were just going to make things worse?" The old man studied her for a moment, his eyes glowing with a deep wisdom that felt ancient and beyond her comprehension. "The lantern chooses who it gives its power to," he said quietly. "It is not a matter of whether or not you deserve it. It is a matter of what lies within you. The lantern sees the heart, the soul, and the intentions behind the wish. It offers an opportunity to learn, to grow. But whether you succeed or fail, that is up to you." Mia's mind reeled. So, I was supposed to learn something? But how was I supposed to know what would happen? I just wanted things to get better. I didn't realize I could mess everything up. The old man nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Ah, but that's the nature of the lantern, child. It shows you the path, but it does not tell you which step to take. You must walk it on your own, and in doing so, you discover your own strength and your own limitations. It is in the mistakes, the failures, and the struggles that you will find your true power." Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. "I don't feel powerful," she said quietly. "I feel like everything's falling apart. I wanted to be happy, to have my dad around more, to have friends who cared. But now, I have no idea what to do." The old man's smile returned, this time softer, as though he understood the weight of her pain. "That too, is part of it. You wished for things you thought would bring happiness, but happiness is never as simple as we imagine it to be. It's not about what we gain or what we have. It's about understanding what we truly need, and the balance that must come with it." Mia listened intently, the fire's warmth reaching deep into her bones. The old man's words were starting to make sense, but they also left her with more questions. What was it that she truly needed? What was the balance she had missed? "Tell me, Mia," the old man asked gently, his voice low but steady. "What is it that you truly want? Not what you think you need, but what you deep down desire. Not from the heart of a child, but from the soul of the person you are becoming." Mia paused, closing her eyes as she reflected on his words. She felt the lantern in her hands, warm and steady, its light flickering softly. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her thoughts tumbled in her mind, but the answer wasn't coming easily. She had spent so much time focusing on what she thought she wanted, what she thought would make everything better, that she hadn't stopped to consider what was truly important. Finally, she took a deep breath, feeling a quiet sense of clarity settle within her. She turned her gaze back to the old man, meeting his eyes. "I don't know exactly what I want anymore," she said softly, her voice steadying. "But I know that I don't want to keep making the same mistakes. I want to understand the consequences of my choices and use them wisely. I want to find a way to make things right, not just for me, but for my family too." The old man's eyes sparkled with approval. "That, child, is a good start. The road ahead may not be easy, but it is the one you must walk. And when the time comes, you will know how to make your final wish. Not out of fear or selfishness, but from a place of wisdom." Mia nodded, feeling the weight of her decision settle in her chest. She had a long way to go before she truly understood the power of her wishes, but for the first time, she felt a sense of hope. Maybe she hadn't messed up as badly as she thought. Maybe there was still time to make things right. As the fire crackled between them, Mia realized that the lantern hadn't been a simple answer to her problems. It had been a test, a way for her to learn, to grow, and to understand the complexity of her choices. She had the power to change things, but only if she learned to use it wisely. And as the old man watched her in silence, Mia knew that her journey was far from over. But for the first time, she was ready to face it. Mia sat there in the soft glow of the campfire, the flames dancing in the old man's eyes, and thought long and hard about her next wish. Her fingers tightened around the lantern, the smooth surface now feeling more like a heavy responsibility than a magical object. She realized, in that quiet moment of reflection, that she didn't want to rely on magic to solve her problems anymore. She didn't want quick fixes or the illusion of control. She had already seen how those paths led to confusion, regret, and unintended consequences. Her wishes had been hasty, driven by desire, not understanding. But now, she was different. She had learned something about herself and about the power of choice. What Mia truly wanted, more than anything else, was the strength to face the challenges ahead without looking for shortcuts. She wanted the kind of strength that came from within, the kind that wasn't given by a wish, but earned through perseverance and effort. She wanted to face life's difficulties with a calm heart and a steady mind, not with desperate wishes for things to be easier. She wanted to have the courage to look at the problems she faced, no matter how big or small, and know that she could overcome them on her own, with the support of her family and friends. Not because the lantern granted her a perfect life, but because she had the strength to create one for herself. Mia thought about her family. They had struggled together, and she realized that her connection with them wasn't just about time spent in easy moments or happy wishes. It was about appreciating the small things, the conversations during quiet dinners, the way her dad laughed when he played games with her, the way her mom's tired eyes softened when she smiled at Mia. These moments were precious, but they needed to be cherished. Mia wanted to see her family for who they were, to appreciate them fully in their imperfections, to be grateful for the love they shared. She didn't want to keep wishing for a perfect world, she wanted to build one. With the pieces she had, finding joy in the messiness of life and in the people who made it meaningful. She thought about her own happiness, too. She had learned the hard way that happiness didn't come from having everything she wanted. It didn't come from wishing away loneliness or fixing every problem. Real happiness, Mia understood now, came from within. It came from making peace with who she was, from accepting the ups and downs of life, and from finding joy in the little things. She no longer wanted to rely on magic to give her happiness. She wanted to find it through her actions, her choices, and her perspective. She let the lantern rest in her lap, the firelight flickering around her, casting shadows on her face. The weight of her decision settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak, but it was a cloak she was ready to wear. This time, she knew exactly what she needed. It wasn't a wish for more time, more friends, or an easier life. What she needed most of all was the wisdom to appreciate what she already had, and the courage to make her life better on her own terms. Mia stood up, taking a deep breath, her heart calm but determined. She looked into the flickering light of the lantern, its golden glow reflecting in her eyes. This was her choice, her moment to step forward into the unknown, not with fear, but with clarity. She had learned so much already, and now it was time to stop wishing for things to change and start taking responsibility for the changes she could make herself. "I wish for the wisdom to appreciate what I have," she whispered, her voice steady, "and the courage to make things better on my own." The lantern gave a final, brilliant flash, its light pulsing with a golden intensity that made the entire forest seem to glow. Mia's heart raced for a moment, as though the world itself were holding its breath. But then, just as quickly, the light began to fade, gently receding like the last rays of a setting sun. The fire beside her crackled, sending sparks into the air, but the lantern's glow had softened, no longer blazing with the power it once had. It was as if the magic had passed through her, leaving her feeling lighter, more at peace. The weight of the lantern, once so heavy in her hands, now felt like a distant memory, replaced with a quiet sense of understanding. The old man smiled, his face more serene than ever. "A wise wish indeed," he said, his voice deep with approval. "You have chosen well, Mia. You have understood what many fail to see. The power to change your life lies not in the magic you wish for, but in the choices you make and the way you choose to face the world." Mia's eyes shone with gratitude as she looked at him, feeling a profound sense of peace settling inside her. The fire crackled softly, the flames still flickering in his eyes. But as she reached for him to thank him, to say something, anything, the old man's form began to blur and fade, as if he were made of smoke and shadows. His presence, once so solid and real, was now evaporating into the night air. Before Mia could speak, he was gone, leaving only the faintest trace of his presence in the air, as if he had never been there at all. The fire, too, began to burn lower, its glow dimming into embers that settled softly into the earth. The night around her felt quieter now, the world no longer holding its breath. It was as if everything had fallen into place, as if Mia had unlocked something inside herself, a door to a new understanding. Mia stood alone in the forest, her heart calm and her mind clear. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer afraid of it. She had the wisdom to appreciate what she had, the courage to face whatever came next, and the strength to make her own way in the world. The lantern's light had faded, but it had given her all the gifts she truly needed. And for the first time in a long while, Mia felt that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. As the last embers of the fire glowed softly in the distance, Mia smiled to herself, knowing that the real magic had always been inside her. From that day on, Mia's life began to shift in ways that were quiet but profound. At first, it was almost imperceptible, like the gradual changing of the seasons, a shift so subtle that it was only evident in hindsight. But over time, the transformation in her heart, mind, and soul became undeniable. It wasn't a sudden burst of magic or an instantaneous fix to everything she'd been struggling with. Instead, it was a series of small, yet powerful changes, each one building on the last, like the way each brushstroke adds depth and dimension to a painting. Mia stopped rushing. She stopped waiting for life to present her with grand moments or magical opportunities. Instead, she embraced the small, quiet moments, those seemingly insignificant pieces of life that, when pieced together, formed something far more beautiful and fulfilling than any wish could ever bring. She began to take things one step at a time, no longer burdened by the need to fix everything all at once. She realized that happiness wasn't something that could be granted to her, it was something she had to create, day by day, in the little things. She started by approaching school with a new mindset. Instead of putting pressure on herself to make friends or be popular, Mia simply focused on being kind. She began to smile more, to greet others with an open heart, to show empathy when someone was feeling down. It wasn't a calculated strategy to gain approval, it was simply who she was becoming. And slowly, ever so slowly, people started to take notice. At first, it was the shy girl in her math class who smiled back at her, a quiet acknowledgement of the shared human experience. Then, it was a classmate who struck up a conversation about a book they both loved. Gradually, her world started to feel less empty, not because she had forced herself into new friendships, but because she had become someone who naturally attracted kindness and connection. And Mia wasn't just focused on making new friends. She made a point to nurture the relationships she already had. She sent text messages to the friends she had before she moved, even if they didn't live nearby. She found small ways to show her appreciation for her teachers, offering thanks when they helped her understand a difficult lesson or simply giving them a warm smile. Mia started to realize that friendships didn't have to be grandiose or defined by perfect moments. They were simply about showing up, being present, and caring for each other in quiet, everyday ways. Her relationship with her family grew in ways she hadn't expected either. At first, it had been all about fixing the problems, smoothing over the cracks. But as time went on, Mia began to understand that it wasn't about making everything perfect. It was about embracing the imperfections and working through them together. She realized that her parents weren't just caregivers and providers. They were people too, with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own fears. And they, just like her, were doing the best they could with what they had. Mia made it a point to help around the house more. Not because it was expected, but because it made her feel connected. She folded laundry without being asked, took out the trash when her mom was too tired, and helped her dad fix things around the house. But more than just the tasks, she began to really listen to her parents when they spoke, offering them the same kindness and patience they had always shown her. She noticed how her dad's tired face softened when he saw her helping without him needing to ask. She noticed how her mom's shoulders seemed to relax when Mia would surprise her with a cup of tea after a long day. The little things began to add up. Her family started to spend more time together, and though they still had their challenges, there was a warmth between them that wasn't there before. A quiet understanding that they were in this together, no matter what. Mia found herself taking a greater interest in the family's dynamics, becoming the bridge between her parents when they struggled to communicate. She encouraged them to take breaks, to spend moments of joy together, even when the world outside was chaotic. They started taking Sunday walks after dinner, something so simple but so grounding. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they would walk in silence, but there was a peace in those moments that Mia had never fully appreciated until now. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mia would often sit by her window, looking out at the woods beyond her house. The old man's words echoed in her mind, a quiet refrain that had become the core of her new outlook on life. Happiness isn't wished for, Mia. It's made. Those words no longer felt like a cryptic riddle or an unreachable ideal. They felt like truth. Mia understood now that happiness wasn't a far-off destination. It wasn't something you wished for and hoped would magically appear. Happiness was built in the moments, the decisions, the way you moved through the world each day. She didn't need magic to change her life. She had the tools all along. She had the power of kindness, of empathy, of choice. Every act of love, every step she took toward gratitude, was a choice she made to create happiness, not wait for it to be handed to her. And the more she worked at it, the more she saw it reflected in the world around her, in the laughter of her friends, the peace in her family, the quiet contentment she now found in her own heart. At night, Mia would look at the lantern, still resting on her windowsill, its light gone but its presence still strong. It had given her the lesson she needed, but the magic it had once held was no longer necessary. The lantern had shown her the way, but it was her actions, her heart, her choices that had transformed her life. She didn't need the lantern's glow anymore because she had found her own inner light. It was warm, steady, and real. And every night before bed, Mia would close her eyes, and as she drifted off to sleep, she thought about how far she had come, how much she had grown. She had learned that life was messy and unpredictable, but that didn't mean it couldn't be beautiful. She had learned that happiness wasn't something to be wished for. It was something to be made, cultivated in the small acts of love, resilience, and gratitude. She thought about the future, knowing there would be challenges ahead, moments when life wouldn't feel perfect. But now, she wasn't afraid of those moments. She knew she had the strength to face them. She knew that happiness didn't need to be chased, it didn't need to be a far-off goal. It was already here, in the world she had built with her own hands. Mia smiled to herself as she drifted off to sleep, her heart full of peace. Her journey wasn't over, but she was no longer searching for the magic to make everything right. The true magic was in the everyday moments, in the choices she made, in the way she loved and lived. And for the first time, Mia knew with complete certainty that she had the power to create her own happiness. No wishes required. Moral of the story. True happiness doesn't come from wishes. It comes from the deep understanding and appreciation of what we already have. It is not about waiting for a magical moment to arrive or hoping that our problems will be solved by a stroke of luck. Rather, happiness is cultivated through the choices we make, the way we view the world, and the effort we put into creating positive change in our lives. At the heart of it, happiness is about gratitude, recognizing the value in the little things that we often take for granted. It's about appreciating the love and support of our families, the friendships that grow naturally, and the moments of quiet peace that we often overlook in our rush for bigger dreams. By focusing on these small, everyday blessings, we can transform our perspective and begin to see the world in a new light. We learn to find joy in the present moment, rather than constantly seeking it outside of ourselves. But happiness is not a passive experience. It requires courage and effort. It demands that we confront our challenges head-on and take responsibility for our own growth. It's about having the bravery to make difficult decisions, to face discomfort, and to learn from our mistakes. Sometimes, it means letting go of what we think we want and learning to embrace what we need. It's about finding the strength to keep moving forward, even when things aren't perfect, and trusting that our efforts will eventually pay off in ways we may not expect. Happiness also comes from kindness, both toward ourselves and others. It's in the simple, everyday actions we take to lift each other up, offering a helping hand, lending a listening ear, or showing gratitude for the people who make our lives better. It's about recognizing that, just as we are all on our own journeys, we are also interconnected, and our acts of kindness can ripple outward, making the world a better place one small gesture at a time. At the end of the day, true happiness is not a destination. It's a way of living, a mindset, a series of choices, and an approach to the world that embraces the fullness of our lives as they are, while working toward the things we desire with patience, resilience, and love. It's not about waiting for something magical to come into our lives. It's about realizing that we already have the power to create magic in our own hearts, in our own homes, and in our own communities. The key is not in wishing for change, but in having the courage and wisdom to make the change ourselves. So, let us remember that happiness isn't something that's given to us. It's something we create through every act of kindness, every moment of appreciation, and every step we take toward a brighter, more fulfilled life. True happiness is found in the journey, not the destination, and it's waiting for us to discover it, one day at a time, one choice at a time.